was fascinating to watch in real time, that we were the first people in 4,500 years to see these little red hieratic characters on the floor of the chamber. That was very exciting. So that's why we're looking forward to doing something that seems quite simple, but is actually quite complicated, to look beyond the Queen's Chamber North blocking stone, and that's what we're planning to do. So there's a 2 or 3 millimeter gap above the top of that blocking stone, which is what we plan to use to insert the camera. What's more exciting is that they discovered a much larger cavity.
What % chance do you think that it's a real cavity?
More than 90%. I think we would say that it's more than 50% likely that we would be looking at something which would be, say, 40 meters long by 4 by 4 meters. It would be equivalent, effectively, of finding a grand gallery above the grand gallery. It seems to me it's a set of it could be a set of chambers. It's quite feasible. There are other passageways that we're just not aware of, and they are accessed by places that people go day in, day out and think nothing of them. The best keeper of the secret of the pyramid is not Hawass or organizations or secret organizations or whatever. It's the pyramid itself.
And you feel like 2026 is the year when we get into the big void?
Yes, we have the technology to do it. So yeah, I'm confident about that.
Welcome, Shaun Whitehead.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you flying all the way across the ocean to come see me.
It was my pleasure, and you have a fantastic studio here, so it's wonderful to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to have you, and it's been great to be working with you preliminarily, for the last several months. It's been exciting.
Thank you for your support, and welcome to the team, and I think we'll have a great adventure together.
Me too. I'm looking forward to it. There's a handful of really cool projects that are coming up, and so this is kind of the opportunity to give all of my followers and the people out there listening an update on what's really going on with the projects.
Yeah, I think we have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, me too. So yeah, I mean, from the big void, obviously people are really interested in hearing about that and that exploration, and then the Queen's Chamber North, that shaft, and getting up in there and figuring out what's behind that blocking stone. And then you've got a lot of other really cool things going on there as well. So
quite a lot to cover, and I think it's important to say that I'm just a representative of a big team that has been working on lots of things for many years. So hopefully we can make it clear that this is not just something I'm representing those, hopefully, and hopefully we can discuss how everybody fits into the team, and that's very important to me.
Love it. Let's do that. Maybe we start there. How big is the team?
Well, in the pyramid, it's really primarily 10 people at the moment, but over the years it has involved a lot of people, because one of the things that we want to do is to encourage students. A lot of it is inspiring cohorts of students over the years, so I won't be able to go into them all, but I suppose it might be a good idea to go back to where the pyramid stuff all began. And then we'll work forward from there, and I'll try to mention the different members of the teams as we go along. And for anybody who's watching who knows that they added something to the projects, thank you very much. If I forget you, it's not because you weren't important. It's really just there are so many people to be grateful for who have helped us along the way. Going right back to the beginning, I always say, well, it really started with aliens. If I was thinking about this last night, and it's aliens that started the whole thing.
All right, love it.
And not aliens as your colleague alien that is sitting over in the corner there, Roz, looking for alien or extraterrestrial life. And my career started as a space engineer. I am still a space engineer. And one of the projects that we did was looking for life on Mars. And there was a British-led project called Beagle 2. And part of that project was to, one of the things about Mars is that it's a very harsh environment for life. It has a very thin atmosphere. And if you want to find life, you need to dig down beneath the surface, because ultraviolet light reaches the surface and kills any organisms. So we happen to have a great chemistry set, as it were, which was a mass spectrometer, which could sample either the air or rocks to look for things like methane in the air and carbon isotopes in rocks. In order to do that, you've got to either dig down deep beneath the surface or grind away the outer surface of rocks. And this is where the Hong Kong Polytechnic University comes into it. There's a rather eccentric dentist called TC who encouraged Hong Kong Polytechnic University and the great team there to get involved on our project. I was the chief engineer for the suite of tools and instruments that would reach out and touch and sample the surface. And so I was dealing directly with the guys in Hong Kong, and the person, and TC was really my initial interface. We worked successfully together. We produced a great tool which we could introduce, which we could add to our suite of instruments. And then, as usual, you pack everything up, put it onto the spacecraft, and then you move on to the next project. At that point, I left the Space Research Centre where I was working, and I went off and did other things. I was just I'd been working so hard on the Mars project for, say, 2 years that I wanted to go off and do something different and see if I could get involved in adventures or whatever. I didn't care. I just wanted to move on. And about a year after I'd left, TC contacted me out of the blue, and he said, I want to do something in the pyramid. He'd watched a special in 2002 where Pyramid rover had gone into the pyramid, and he'd seen that they had climbed up these mysterious shafts. Some people call them air shafts, but they could be, nobody really knows what they're there for. And the robot had got to the end, and it had seen these doors, so about 20 centimeter square doors, and with copper pins protruding from them. And he knew that on one of the doors, at least one of the copper pins had fallen onto the floor of the shaft. All he wanted to do was collect it. TC is obsessed with sampling tools. He's produced sampling tools for deep sea submarines, for astronauts to use on space stations. And so he's interested in developing, I suppose being a dentist, it's similar sort of technology. You need to grip things. And he'd got involved with Singapore University, and everything was going smoothly with Singapore. And then for whatever reason, TC is a little bit of an interesting guy, so whether he annoyed them or whether he stepped too far on something, I don't know, but Singapore University had stopped talking to him. So he said to me, I want to put a sampling tool onto the Singapore University robot, which is planned to climb up the pyramid shafts. Can you help me? So I contacted Singapore University with a very sound engineering plan and saying, TC's a good guy. And Singapore University said, we don't want anything to do with you or TC or whatever. TC, yeah. So that was it. So I thought, what can we do? And I know at the time that Zahi Hawass was running that project. So TC had some connections, and I must remember one of the important connections. I must talk about that later. But we managed to, TC had basically been knocking on the door of the Supreme Council of Antiquities. I think he literally camped out on the door of the Supreme Council of Antiquities in Zamalek in Cairo, and finally arranged a meeting with Zahi. And so I thought, if I go along, I want to do something to impress Zahi, bearing in mind all we wanted to do was have a little arm which would reach out and some grippers that would pick up this pin, and we hoped that Zahi would say to Singapore, these guys can do the sampling. Mm-hmm. And so I produced a robot arm, which was programmed in the days, pre-Arduino days. These days you could do it very quickly with an Arduino, but I built it with a microcontroller from scratch. And I built this arm to basically carry out a little dance, as it were, and some little robotic grippers, and just to demonstrate the technology. And I thought that's all that we needed to do. I went along to showed it to Zahi, and Zahi said, "This is great. Can you do everything?" And I was like, "What do you mean everything?" He said, "Can you make the rover? Can you do all of this?" And I had not thought about it at that point, but I said, "Yes, of course we can."
Mm-hmm. Good answer. Yeah.
And then that led to about 6 years of working to actually get this all to fruition.
And what year was that meeting again?
So that meeting was in 2004.
Okay.
And we finally actually made it to the top with the camera to look at what was behind the southern shaft blocking stone in 2010.
Because a hole had been drilled into that blocking stone, right?
A very large hole had been drilled by Pyramid Rover, so we knew that we could. And they put a camera through it, but they were in a rush because it was done live.
Uh-huh.
And so they never went back, and they never took a good look around. They had no idea about what the nature of the copper pins were, or what else was in the chamber.
That was 96 that they went in there?
They went in there in 2002.
Oh, okay, right.
That was the thing that had inspired TC in the first place.
Gotcha.
There was a whole sequence of events that we had to go through. So I thought we were going to basically get the job, but Zahi very sensibly said, "It's not as simple as that. You need to convince the committee that you're better than Singapore University doing the job." So we were sort of dueling in the desert, as it were, to prove the robots were capable of the task, and it was very interesting. There's a lot of interesting things, but first of all, I want to go back to somebody who was very important, who was a sort of an ally or a champion of our project, and it's a guy called Farouk El-Baz. Farouk was he's a geologist, but he was the guy who taught the Apollo astronauts how to do geology. He featured in one of the Tom Hanks From the Earth to the Moon episodes. It's called The Brain of El-Baz. And El-Baz's brain was basically a huge map of the moon that he kept on the ceiling. And he would explain to the astronauts what they needed to look for, because most astronauts weren't geologists. There was one, Harrison Schmitt. But Farouk El-Baz was an Egyptian, and he also got US citizenship, and he was a sort of a link for us between space, so TC could talk to him via the space connections, and Egyptology, because Farouk had what a great guy, a definition of a true gentleman. I think. And he was so great for us in the early days, and I'm totally grateful for what he has done. So he always advised on scientific things such as archaeology of the boat pits outside the Great Pyramid, stuff like that. So absolute legend of a guy. So going back to what we were doing with Singapore University, in order to get the job, we not only had to demonstrate that the robots would do the job, but also in a similar environment. So the authorities built essentially a facsimile of the shafts on the plateau, some distance from the pyramid. And it was quite fascinating because these shafts that we were interested in, 20 centimeters square. They obviously have top and bottom blocks to form the shafts. They're not cut out as holes. You would have, say, a base, and then you would have a U-shaped block on the top of it. But these, we wanted to make them quite precisely as they were in the pyramid. And so workmen would come along, people who worked for the Supreme Council of Antiquities, and hack away at these things. And it was quite interesting because they were using very basic tools, but they were making perfectly square shaft holes for us to test the robots in. So I thought it was quite interesting to watch them doing that, because it made me think all the way back to the ancient Egyptians who had created these things in the first place. And it's a great example of what you can do with skill as opposed to, fancy alien technology, let's say. And so we had various competitions over the years with Singapore University, and things would fail all of the time because it's hot, it's dusty, it's complicated equipment. But eventually we got the go-ahead, probably in 2009, to say that we would be the team that could climb that shaft. So we sent the rover to, after many obstacles, we sent the rover to the top of the southern shaft in the Queen's Chamber and popped the camera through the hole. And I'd made a camera that could, I call it a snake camera, but it could sort of bend and look around in all different directions so that we could survey the whole of the chamber beyond this hole, which was about a 20 centimeter cube chamber. And I saw, which was fascinating to watch in real time, that we were the first people in 4,500 years to see these little red hieratic characters on the floor of the chamber. That was very exciting. And then we could turn the camera back to look on the back face of the blocking stone and see that how the pins were terminated. Now, there had been lots of theories about this. Do these pins go to some sort of electrical power plant? Do they have a lever on them that would somehow move the door? All sorts of stuff. What we found is that they were terminated in beautiful little loops, and we still don't know exactly why they were terminated that way. And I think that is makes a really interesting question, or an interesting point, is everybody who looks at the pyramid. I always say the pyramid is the reflection of the person who is looking at it. So if you are an engineer, for example, you would look for engineering reasons why these loops were created. And you could say, oh, the door probably pivoted on these loops. If you're a symbologist or an Egyptologist, you might say, that's like a snake shape. And we know that snakes are associated with something in particular. And so there are a lot of theories about it, and we don't know. And that's the beautiful thing. And a key part of what we're doing is to gather evidence so that other people can make up their own minds. As I always say, if we find something, it does not give us the God-given right to claim that we know why it's there. It's just give it to the world and say, this is what we found, make of it what you will.
Love it, love it. And so all of that being the case, what are your thoughts? Like, I mean, what do you think the pins were for? What do you think the loops were for?
Yeah,
I know, and I super appreciate that you're just presenting the data and presenting the evidence. But I also know that you're a very thoughtful person. You've probably thought about this a lot. Like,
I have thought about it, and I think you can't necessarily take it in isolation. So. You have to work your way back to what the shafts were for in the first place. I think it's probably a good idea to think about the context of the shafts and how they were discovered for people who don't know the history of it, because it's quite interesting. The King's Chamber shaft. There are 4 shafts in total in the pyramid. 2 that emanate from the north and south walls of the King's Chamber, again approximately 20 centimeters square. These ascend to the outside of the pyramid, and if you look at them, you would probably say they are ventilation shafts, just because they go to the outside because they go all the way to the outside of the pyramid. It sort of makes sense. And it sort of makes sense because the whole structure of the pyramid is unique. Most pyramids have structure underground, and so everything, say, warm air goes upwards, so you get a natural circulation from underground. the Great Pyramid is unique with all of these structures above it. So you've got to start thinking, how could you simulate or how could you emulate what was happening with the underground passageways in something where there were actually chambers above ground. So that's the King's Chamber, and people had known about these King's Chamber shafts for some time.
And can I ask real quick that with the Torah limestone, the casing stones that existed, is it common belief that the King's Chamber shaft would have opened up on the outside and gone all the way?
That was a massive question.
Yeah, right.
Because because
anything could come in.
The original casing stones, facing stones, had all but disappeared off the pyramid, and probably caused by earthquakes initially to shake them loose. But then, of course, if you look around the buildings of Cairo, there is a lot of beautiful Tura limestone buildings which would have been made from these casing stones. That's true of anywhere. If you go to anywhere, say in the UK, where you have ruined churches, other big stone buildings, you'll often find that the stone has been reused locally. So there wasn't really any evidence there. There's no written history of the shafts actually exiting on the outside. But we do know that when they were excavated sometime in the 1800s, there was supposedly an iron plate that was found near the exit, almost as if that might have been involved with the exit for some reason. The weird thing about that is iron was very rare in certainly in the old. Well, it wasn't rare. It was rare it was only available in its natural form. The only iron that existed came from meteorites. So again, it's quite interesting, by the way. The only iron. It's very important to remember this. The only iron that existed in the Old Kingdom came from meteorites, and how special must that have been that literally you were getting a material that comes from space, and you could be wandering around in the desert and there would be this very strange rock and it had amazing properties. That must have been supremely magical, and it makes you wonder how important that was to ancient Egyptians. I think incredibly important. But anyway, coming back onto the shaft. So we knew that there was some, or they knew in the 1800s, of course, that there were these shafts in the King's Chamber. But it wasn't until somebody called Wayman Dixon started looking in the Queen's Chamber, using a bit of logic, that the other pair of shafts were discovered. So a little bit of context of Wayman Dixon. He's from the northeast of England, and I'm from the northeast of England, so I like that. He's from a Quaker family, and his family were entrepreneurs, surveyors, geologists, and his relative was the Dixon, Jeremiah Dixon, who gave his name to Mason-Dixon line, Dixieland, all of those sort of things. So there's a connection with that, which I think is really interesting. And Wayman Dixon thought, I'll have a little look around the Queen's Chamber, and he just took a straw or a piece of wire or something and started doing what you would do, is prodding around inside the Queen's Chamber, and noticed that there was a crack, and his straw went all the way through the crack. So being a gentleman, he didn't do all of the hard work himself. He had his man of all work, I think he called him, chisel out these things, and they found that there were these shafts which are very similar to the ones up in the King's Chamber. So if you'd gone into the Queen's Chamber and all you saw was these beautiful, well-cut blocks, you would have no idea that those shafts were behind those blocks unless you had done what Wayman Dixon did and chiseled them out. In which case, how could there be air shafts? How could there be usable air shafts? Because they were blocked at the bottom end. not only were they blocked at the bottom end, but they also worked out that later, say in the early 1900s, when they put rods into there, that they were blocked at the top end as well. So not reaching the outside, couldn't be air shafts. And then that brings us all the way back to what was the purpose of the shafts, and what was the purpose of the blocking stones at the end, and therefore what was the potential purpose of the copper pins and hooks. And nobody's got any true idea.
Nobody knows.
Yeah, after all of that.
Yeah.
The important thing to bear in mind is that again, it's not necessarily just a case of what was useful from the point of view of engineering or what was potentially useful, but it was what did that mean in the culture. I think you cannot divorce the two. But I may be saying that because, again, the pyramid is the reflection of the person who's looking at it, and I've got a fairly broad mind about these things, so I don't necessarily just see it in terms of engineering. But my best guess is that the shafts served a dual purpose. If the Queen's Chamber had ever been used for any religious purpose, if you like, then it would have been opened up, possibly to the outside, possibly for air, but also possibly for whatever the religion at the time had decided. You did not need a door in ancient Egypt to go through a door to heaven, for example. It was perfectly okay to sort of, just like in the Roadrunner cartoons where Wile E. Coyote paints a tunnel onto the side of a hill or something, and he can't run through it, and the Roadrunner can run through it. That's possibly the same as in ancient Egypt, where your spirit could go through a door as long as it was there symbolically. So you didn't need, for example, the idea of when people say that it was used as a sort of a star shaft to project the pharaoh to the stars, you didn't need that. You could just have the pharaoh going through a door to the stars, for example. But we don't know whether there was something religious. I'm saying that they had a dual purpose. So there was something in their culture or their religion where it was important to connect this out to the outside, but also potentially just as an air shaft. But then it begs the question of why was it done like that? And it's probable. It seems most probable that the Queen's Chamber was almost a backup. A lot of people don't like this idea, but to me, there's a subterranean chamber in the pyramid, which I feel is probably either based around an initial cave system that existed and was going to be used anyway for religious purposes, because it's totally unfinished, it's totally rough, but it does connect to when you get above the bedrock, it does connect to a proper passageway. So it may have been that they were using that for religious purposes as well, but I think that my guess is that it was almost a decoy, because most pharaohs up to that point had been interred underground. So if the pyramid was used as a burial place for a pharaoh, and I'm not sure it necessarily has been proven that it was, but if it was always to contain the important thing, it's possible that that was just a decoy, because you just go in the main entrance of the pyramid if you're a tomb raider, go all the way down the descending passageway into the subterranean chamber and find nothing, and then you just leave. So if you were to say, you look at this picture of the pyramid and imagine you could remove all of the structures that are above the grey bit, above the ground bit, that would look like a typical pyramid. Everything above it doesn't look like a typical pyramid. So I think that would have been quite a clever idea to design that purely as a decoy.
So we don't know if the Queen's Chamber shafts go all the way out or not yet, right?
We're pretty sure that they don't.
That they don't.
Because there is some sort of block beyond the southern Queen's Chamber shaft, which just looks like an ordinary block.
Okay. doesn't
we
look
don't
like...
know what happens beyond the Queen's Chamber North shaft, and that's what we're planning to look at. So going back to the point, we can then sort of ignore the subterranean chamber and think about the reasons why something would be done in the Queen's Chamber. As you're building the pyramid, it's easy to look at the pyramid and think of it in terms of this is something, everything is more or less built at the same time. But of course it wasn't. It was 20 years. If you go up just a meter or two in the pyramid, that could be the difference of months or years, depending on how far down the pyramid you are. Right at the base, it might take a year or two to build up 2 or 3 meters. So we're not seeing things that are necessarily all designed at the same time, certainly not constructed at the same time. So it's possible that there was a plan where the Queen's Chamber was almost a backup. And so you can imagine that the shafts would have only come into use if the Queen's Chamber, if something had happened, if the pharaoh had died early, if you think of it as being if you think of it as being a burial place for the pharaoh, if the pharaoh died early, it's plausible. I don't know whether that would be the truth.
It's a possibility. Most of my listeners do not think that it was a tomb.
Yeah,
they don't know. Hard to know what it is.
Well, we can. I think it's very useful to think about that point. There's no evidence for any pharaoh ever being buried in any pyramid. That's not absence of evidence doesn't mean evidence of absence. But you would say what happened? What happened? Why would there be no evidence anywhere? You never know. I mean, in Khufu's pyramid, there might be a big space that is still vacant that nobody's actually looked into. No tomb raiders got into there. And it might be that something could be discovered in there that says, look, this is the first pharaoh that has ever been found inside a pyramid. We don't know. It seems unlikely, but the fact is that we don't know. So I would say that anybody with a theory that pharaohs weren't buried in the pyramid, I think that's perfectly reasonable, and there's no evidence against that. Egyptology comes down to what is the best idea at the time. The best idea at the time right now is that pyramids were resting places for pharaohs, but we don't know.
The pin. So do we know where the pin is today?
We know where the pins are.
Okay.
So there are 2 pins that are intact on the Queen's Chamber North shaft rocking stone.
And the one on the south, one of the ones on the south fell off.
One had fallen in history. We don't know when. One fell off because Pyramid Rover knocked on the door and knocked it off.
Okay.
They had a sort of a sophisticated device, which was a knocker on the front of the robot. Pyramid Rover was built by iRobot, and they create some great robots, but it's not our style. We always wanted to do the most gentle, careful exploration of the pyramid. And, you can look at the great big drill that they were using. They just wanted to do that job, which is fair enough. They did the job that they wanted to do. But unfortunately, they did knock the other pin off. We know where they are. One is in a sort of a crack in a pile of dust, maybe a meter or 2 down in the middle of the shaft. One has somehow rolled off towards the right-hand side. So if you look at that picture there, if you look on the right-hand side where it's sort of shadowed at the bottom of a bit further down, it's because you can imagine it coming off, rolling, and then rolling in an arc to the side. So we know where they are.
Okay.
And we have little delicate tools that we can use to pick them up, but they have eluded us so far, which is quite funny because they're the thing that got me into it in the first place. So the moment when we actually find those and pick them up, and collect them and bring them back safely, that would be a big thing, because it would have brought me full circle, and it would have brought TC full circle. It's the thing that he's obsessed with. I'd really like to do that for TC.
Are there any plans to do that?
Yeah, so we want to do that in either the next phase, which would be in October this year, or December this year.
Nice.
It sounds easy, but it's not. It's not that easy. These things are delicate.
Yeah.
They've already corroded a lot, and they also have fallen into little crevices that makes them difficult to pick up. You can't use magnets because they're copper. They're made from copper. You can't really, probably don't want to put any force into them, so it's just really quite tricky to. It's something that you can't know until you try it. That's what we're going to do.
And what do you think you're going? What can we learn from analyzing those?
Well, we can learn a heck of a lot, because for one thing, there is no metal. There is no other metal in the pyramid.
Anywhere in the pyramid?
No. The only metal that has been ever discovered, and the only piece of metal was the piece of iron, which we don't know the origin of it, which was on the outside of the pyramid. The copper pins on the doors or blocking stones, and a mystery item that was discovered by Wayman Dixon. When they broke through into probably the northern shaft, the account varies. There were two things lying at the bottom of the shaft, which can't have been put there by anybody else but the pyramid builders. They can't have been accidentally left there by anybody else other than the pyramid builders. And these things have been put into the British Museum and almost sort of forgotten about, but they're fascinating things. So one is a green dolerite ball, about sort of, those things, which you might say, well, that was probably used for pounding stone. And then there's this copper hook, which is in the shape of a sort of an Aries symbol, so it's like a fork, and it had a piece of cedar wood connected to it. The piece of cedar wood is subject to a mystery all on its own, because it was sent back to the museum and disappeared. And I was asking about where it was because I wanted to carbon date it. Eventually, it was discovered after I had pestered a long time. Nobody bothered to tell me that they had discovered it and carbon dated it, which ended up carbon dating to as close as you can guess, to about the same time as the pyramid was created, a little bit earlier probably, but then wood was always recycled. So maybe about, say, within 500 years of when the pyramid was supposedly built, which is fantastic, because that dates in classic Flinders Petrie style. Is if you can sort of lay layers on top of something, you know it can't have been faked about when the item was put into place. So we can be pretty sure that, apart from if Wayman Dixon had somehow decided to claim, this is something that I found in the pyramid, when he didn't, I don't think he had any reason to do that necessarily.
Well, no, and where would he have gotten a piece of wood that was from 3300 BC?
Yeah, exactly.
And so
it's not available in the local shop.
No, right. And so that piece of wood, though, is interesting. So, I mean, being from, I think the dates were 3350 to 3000 BC, basically, in that time range.
Something like that.
3400 to 3000, something like that. But that's like, does it seem realistic and plausible that they would have used a piece of wood that was up to 600 years older than the pyramid itself?
Yeah, I think you can argue that there's potential for error in the dating anyway, and also we don't know, because if you said the only wood that we can use in the pyramid is this sacred wood that it's a sacred building. Probably. Why wouldn't you be using special tools to do anything that's in the key areas? And this brings us back to what the shafts were for. On my thinking is that even if the shafts were just for air, for some reason, because they were blocked at both ends, they needed to be kept pure, sort of, pure is the best way to put it. So maybe anybody who was doing anything to do with those shafts might have to use a special tool or whatever. And my personal theory is, what if this fairly common item, which was the stone that was used for pounding other stones, what if that accidentally fell into the shaft while it was being made, bearing in mind that the bottom end was closed and they couldn't open it? What if they had, on a long piece of wood, what if they had put in a hook to try and rescue the ball? What if that hook had broken and along with a piece of cedar wood, and they knew that shaft was contaminated? That may have been enough for them to say, that's it, close down the shaft. We're not doing anything with it anymore. We have to build it so high, let's say, but let's abandon this. And anyway, the King's Chamber is being built now, so let's move on to the King's Chamber. It may be something as simple as that. I think the fact is, we can't know. There's no way that we can know for sure. It would all be guessing, and any of the viewers' guesses would be as good as mine. So
that's pretty interesting, though. Potentially, it was abandoned and never made it to become a ventilation shaft because it was closed off. But then, why the pins? Why the copper pins? You know, I mean.
Well, what I'm hoping is, if we look beyond the blocking stone at the top of the Queen's Chamber North shaft, that we get some more evidence about what it might be. So going back to what we discovered in the southern shaft, these three hieratic characters, the best theory that I've seen, I had the theory individually, but somebody also published it separately, was that it's the numbers 121. It's not 121, it's 120 and 1. And we know that the number 11 was important. And we know that 11 squared is 121, if we remember our maths. And we know that from our own measurements that the length of the Queen's Chamber south shaft is 121 cubits. Seems a little bit coincidental. What if they build it to 121, stop it there, write down 121? That could have been a sort of a sacred thing, for reason for them to write it. Or it could have been as simple as the boss had said, the work gang boss had said, it's like if you're renovating a house and you pull down some old wallpaper or whatever, you often find the little sketches and doodles and sums that the builder has made. So it could be just the equivalent of the chief builder saying, that's it, mark it there, 121, let's stop that. What is interesting is that the northern shaft, even though it bends, and we don't really know for sure why it bends quite like it does, partially to go around the Grand Gallery, but why would you then build the shaft if it had to go around the Grand Gallery in the first place? But the fact is, that seems to be pretty much 121 cubits as well, even though it's bending. So it'd be interesting to look beyond that shaft, but that blocking stone, see if the copper pins have a similar sort of termination, and see if there's similar hieratic characters that are written on the floor, because then that gives us extra evidence to work with. So that's why we're looking forward to doing something that seems quite simple, but is actually quite complicated, to look beyond the Queen's Chamber North blocking stone, and that's what we're planning to do very soon, as soon as we can. I think what I would like to do with that, what we're planning to do is I'll show you something now, because this is important. It's just to give you an idea. This is the endoscope.
You'll have to talk in the mic, though. Yeah.
So,
you said this is the endoscope?
So this is the endoscope that we are going to be using. So, hang on. It's just
camera.
over 1 millimeter.
Wow.
And so That's got 720 by 720 pixels, which is a decent resolution, so we can get a much better image than we were on the previous cameras, which were, obviously, that's old technology now. What we found before is we couldn't introduce, it's with a tiny, people say, oh, well, why are you only getting a poor picture from a tiny camera? It's not necessarily the camera, it's getting enough light into there. So what I'm doing this time is, we don't want to drill a big hole. We need a tiny camera, and so there's a gap. If you've got a picture of the northern shaft blocking stone, which I sent something through in the report, but there's it appears to be as though there's a 2 or 3 millimeter gap above the top of that blocking stone, which is what we plan to use to insert the camera over the top of the blocking stone, so we don't damage the pyramid at all.
Totally non-invasive.
Totally non-invasive. That's what we're all about. Yeah. As much as we can possibly.
Can I see that?
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. This is a camera.
It's fantastic. The key is getting light in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it's being made into a blade. So the whole thing is going to be 1.8 millimeters thick.
Oops. 1.8 millimeters thick.
1.8 millimeters thick by 3.5 millimeters wide. And what that enables us to do is to have a very powerful chip LED. And that enables us to have a very powerful chip LED. So if the chamber is bigger than we imagined, we can light up more of the chamber. We've got more chance of seeing what is behind it. So what we want to do with that is a dummy run this October, just to see if we can sneak something over the top of the blocking stone. I think, that shows it pretty clearly. I think we've got better pictures from our own rover, because we've been up there and had a good look at it. And we've scanned it as well. You can see where the shadow is, and that indicates that there's enough room. We think it will be built in the same way as the other one as well, and we know that there aren't any, or there shouldn't be any ledges or anything. It was really useful in the southern one because there just happened to be a pair of cracks that run along the top of the ceiling, and when we put the camera through, we saw that the cracks continued. If there was some sort of a ledge, that would have stopped the crack and they wouldn't be in the same place. So that gives us a massive clue that basically the ceiling is flat. So if the ceiling is flat and there's a gap and there's shadow there, that means that we should be able to insert the camera over the top of it. And we plan to do a dummy run, but what I would really like to do, and I haven't really worked out how to do that, is I think a lot of people are interested in what is behind this blocking stone. And if we can possibly do it live or is in as close to real time, so that it's not to turn it into a circus, or it's to allow people to participate in real time and to get an appreciation about what we're doing, and not say we'll get it and then we'll keep it all to ourselves. We know what is there. So genuinely, I would like, for the first time that anybody sees what's behind that door, I'd like everybody to get to see it at the same time, anybody who's interested in seeing it at the same time. So I'm going to try to work out a way to do that. I don't know how, but we can make it happen.
I'll be your backup plan. Like I said, if you want Limitless to live stream that.
Yeah. So we do need to discuss that, and I think it will be fun, and I think it also gives an appreciation of how difficult it can be to do these things as well. And I know that there's a lot of people that think that things are known about, the people working in the pyramid know what more than they're letting on.
Right.
As far as I know, that's not the case. It's never been the case with the work that we've done. To be clear about what the rules are, is that normally you can't, I think this is still the case, we're just assuming this is still the case, is that you can't publish or broadcast things normally without them having been submitted to a formal publication. So, but I've always said in the past, with anything that we've done in the previous work, the data is available to anybody, either through the publication or if people contact me, I'm happy to share everything that we know as long as it has been published. And everybody who has contacted me, I've always been happy to share the information because I know so many people are interested in it. And it may be that they can come up with answers that we can't come up with ourselves. So we'll try to do that with this chamber. I think the exciting thing about the chamber on the northern shaft, the little chamber on the northern shaft, is that north was a sort of a sacred direction for the ancient Egyptians. Okay, east and west were from the point of view of rising and setting of the sun and of stars, but there is something about the imperishable northern stars which make them particularly interesting as a sort of a resting place for the pharaoh or a place to aim the pharaoh. So if you look at a lot of things like Zosa's Serdab, Josus, some people call it, his Serdab, where the pharaoh is looking out through the holes in a northern direction, presumably for that reason. So it may be that there is something special about this northern chamber. So that makes it extra exciting to find out exactly what is there. It could be nothing. It could be something. So who knows? And then it might give us a clue about what might lay beyond there as well. There's not that much room between the end of the shaft and the outside of the pyramid. Who knows? We don't know. We're just doing what we can to help to find out.
But so, pardon my confusion a little bit, but can it be live streamed then? Can it potentially be live streamed if you have to get it published?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to find out, because the precedent, of course, is that the Pyramid rover looked behind something live. So I think that's probably okay if it's done in the correct way. Our philosophy over the years, and bearing in mind that I've now been working on this for 21 years, my philosophy is always we always want to do things as professionally, as correctly, as simply, and without too much fanfare as much as we can. Because it's not about us, it's about how we can help to provide information for Egyptology, for Egypt itself, and for the rest of the world. So we try to sort of operate. This is why I couldn't say for sure. I would just say very simply, this is what we can do. We recommend that it would be useful for the general public to see. And then we leave it up to the authorities to decide. I wouldn't push anything one way or another. We're in an incredibly privileged position. We are working as a joint Egyptian international mission under the directorship of Zahi. And really, I will leave it up to him to work out what we can do. I can just recommend and say how we will approach it professionally. It's not in my hands how it eventually manifests itself.
Got it. Yeah, he did seem very open to the idea of live stream, live reveal. That was one thing that he said. I can't remember if it was during our podcast or when we went to dinner, but he wanted it to be live.
Yeah.
So
I think it's a good idea. I think as long as it's understood that there's no guarantees. If people want guarantees, then it will never be live. But if we understand that it's done on the best efforts basis, we might find a technical hitch, we might find a something strange that we weren't expecting in beyond that blocking stone. Also, things in the pyramid. It's very weird working in the pyramid. Things happen in the pyramid that shouldn't happen. Things go wrong that shouldn't go wrong. You could say some of it is humidity, some of it is heat, but there is something strange that does happen in the pyramid. So, for example, we found that our communication cables weren't working properly, and one of the reasons was because capacitors, which you use at the termination of the cables, were charging up on their own a lot more than they should, and so I don't think
energetically.
So they were actually building charge. Now we did a control experiment, taking the same capacitors, putting them in other locations outside of the pyramid, similar humidity and temperature. They do build up a charge, but not as much as they do in the pyramid. I'm not saying it's pyramid power. All I can say is the fact is that we have found something strange happening with electronic equipment inside the pyramid. And I don't want to sort of build that up to be some sort of woo-woo thing, but that's just the fact. And I always say to the team, there's a tendency, especially for students, to think, oh, it'll be all right, we'll fix it on the day. And I say, well, if it's not working before you go to the pyramid, you certainly won't get it working in the pyramid. If it is working when you go to the pyramid, it probably won't work when you get to the pyramid. That's just the nature of it, and things break all of the time. Human beings break as well, because it's a sort of a slightly uncomfortable place to work, and so I think there are unknowns about whether one can always, we'll do this and we'll show it live and it'll work perfectly well. We don't know, but I think we're prepared to show it, and I think it's fun to have people sort of coming along with us for the ride. So often people say to me, I know that they want to get into the pyramid, they're fascinated by the pyramid, and they want to do work in the pyramid, and people say, oh, I'll come along, I'll make you cups of tea, I'll carry your bags and things like that. I say, it doesn't work like that. What you have to do to work in the pyramid is 99.9% of the stuff that people don't see. It's not like Hollywood where somebody builds something and it all works and that's fine. Or when it doesn't work, it's all part of the plot anyway. Most people have to be working on the nuts and bolts of doing the boring stuff and testing stuff, and have been working for years before they actually get into the pyramid and do something useful. And this is why I'm grateful to the team. I should mention the main part of the team right now. So we have the guy who helped right at the beginning was a guy at Manchester University called Rob Richardson, who's now, he was at Manchester University. He's now a professor at Leeds University. They have a sort of a spin-out company called Acuity, and there you've got Jake Smith and Jason Liu. On the radar side of things, Jan Franco, who's Canadian, who is like an amazing guy who's been on adventures all over the world, prospecting and doing things with his radar. We've got Neil Shaw, who's an expert on small diameter drilling, and his company in the States. Ian Parker at Solutech in the UK, who's excellent at machining tiny components. Who else? Obviously TC, and then going back further, we had a lot of support. We had a lot of support from Dassault System in France and Jean-Pierre Houdin. Are you aware of Jean-Pierre Houdin? He has a pyramid theory. He's a very smart guy, and he was the guy that introduced us to Dassault system.
Okay.
So there's just so many people. As I said, it's sort of difficult to keep track of everybody who has been involved in it. But everybody who's there in the pyramid is really part of has earned their place. And the other thing that we do is we try to encourage everybody to learn everybody else's job or to help each other. So one never knows what you're going to find yourself doing in the pyramid. I should say on the Egyptian side as well. Obviously, Zahi has been great, and as long as he sees that we're doing things professionally and competently, he keeps out of our way, which is good. And then we have Ahmed Adli, and who's a podcaster himself, a YouTuber himself, and a guy called Abnob who does the climbing of the pyramid for us. He has worked on other projects in archaeology as well. So I would have liked to climb the pyramid myself, but I do realise that it's if somebody had done it before, we might as well just use somebody who has done it before. It's just slightly risky, and so we don't we can't really be losing any team members. So it's better to use somebody who's proved that he's done it at least once before, and now he's done it several times. And that's been really useful because we have that sort of Egyptian international connection, so that when we're away from Giza, we have people who can help in the background, which has been invaluable. So it's great. We have a great bunch of guys, and it's always a pleasure to spend time with them.
Nice.
I think the other thing is that we don't get to see each other that much, of course, because it's difficult. We've all got busy lives outside of the pyramid. So this is another thing that maybe people don't understand, is they sort of assume that the authorities would have teams that are working on these things full time. But this is not the case with our team, for example. We are essentially self-funding apart from kind sponsors. So we have to fit it in among our other work, and so this is why we can probably only do 2 or 3 missions per year maximum. Just getting everybody together is tricky. The other thing is the how long it takes to get security permissions if we have new people in the team. So
I'm going through that right now, right?
Right, yeah. So that right now. Somebody what happens is your application goes into the system. Over 6 months, it is literally hand carried from through 6 different organisations, including the Air Force, the Army, and the Navy, and scrutinised to make sure that you are not an undesirable person that they do not want inside the pyramid or in Egypt. So if you get through that, I think you know that you're okay, or they know that you're okay. So again, it just explains why things can take a little bit longer.
I probably should have put CEO instead of podcaster, because once they check out my podcast titles, I'm going to get rejected from the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, the guy that stupidly, the guy that I didn't mention, Will Westaway, who is absolutely key.
Yeah.
He's almost so key that I sort of assumed it's almost one of these things that you assume that everybody knows about him. His main work is as a filmmaker, and I believe that he's on the application he's down as being a filmmaker, but we don't use him because he's a filmmaker. We don't have him in the team because he's a filmmaker. It's because he's a bit of a passepartout. How passepartout was for Phileas Fogg is that he helps to organise things, he helps to smooth things, he gets on very well with local people, for example. And he's just a general all-round sort of positive person. Yeah. So I wouldn't let the podcaster, being a podcaster, put you off, because that's the key thing that you do. But obviously you're helpful to the team in other ways, and I wouldn't have suggested that you be part of the team if I didn't think that you would fit in well and would be able to help in other things. And already through your network, you've helped us, and with your team, you've helped us with things that we're doing to improve the environment, the atmosphere inside the pyramid. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Yeah, happy to. Honored to be a part of it.
Well, good,
yeah.
good.
Yep.
I have no problem in finding work for other people to do.
Perfect. Good. I have no problem working. So this is a big, important project, as is the next one. You know, the Big Void project.
Yeah.
But before we get to that, maybe. What is it like working with Zahi Hawass? I mean, different people have different opinions. He's a very, very big personality, of course.
Yeah.
But he essentially lets you do your thing, right?
Yeah. He gets things done.
Yeah.
He's incredibly passionate and knowledgeable in certain fields. I think the problem that a lot of people have is that when other people have been powerful and it is seen as a bad thing, if you remove those powerful people, then it creates a sort of a power vacuum. And I think that was obvious, say, after the Arab Spring when Zahi quit his job or was forced to quit his job. I think that wasn't good. Now, whether... I don't think that was good for archaeology. I think it became a little bit chaotic. I think sometimes you need somebody who has that little bit of power, somebody who's, let's say, who is confident in themselves and has connections and is persuasive. I think you need that. I think sometimes a lot of people don't like that. So from my point of view, he's always, so to give you an example, let's say that I've had meetings with him before where I've gone into his big office in Zamalek and said, doing the polite thing where I'd start off by saying, first of all, thank you very much for everything that you've been doing for us, blah, 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 and just be nice to people in general. He would then sort of stop me and say, just tell me what you need. And I like that because it's like, okay, I trust you. Just tell me what you need to make it happen, and that suits me perfectly well. So I would just say that I have a polite, professional, simple relationship with Zahi. I can't really. I don't think that anything that I say is going to change anybody's opinion one way or another. I know a lot of people love him. I know a lot of people aren't fans of his. And I don't think, as I say, that is going to change by anything that I can say. I think his heart is in the right place, and I think you see that with, if you ask him about what he still wants to do and how passionate he is about certain things, and I know that finding remaining secrets in the pyramid is something that's very dear to him. I don't know what he thinks those secrets might be, but I think it's an interesting thing. Actually, I was contemplating this. I think that some people almost have coming back to the alien thing, right? Mm. So people think that the pyramids. Some people think that the pyramids were built by aliens. I've seen enough of Egyptian technology to know that they could perfectly well build the pyramid. But if you look at the root of the word, what alien really means is something foreign or something strange. And I think we all know people who are otherworldly in their intuition or inspiration or whatever. So I believe that the architect of the Great Pyramid, Humayun, and the architect of early pyramids, Imhotep, they were almost otherworldly in their thinking, because if you think about planning anything like a pyramid, it's extraordinary. It might be humanly extraordinary, but it's almost like another world. It's not sort of natural skill to have. And so if you look at somebody like Zahi, I'm not saying that he's an alien, but I do think that some people have a sort of an intuition about things. And I think he's got an intuition about the pyramid based on all of the years that he'd worked in was a custodian and had explored the pyramid and the area of the pyramid. If he thinks there may be something left to find in there, whether that is based on pure fact or not, I think he's the sort of person that you would pay attention to. I'm open-minded about it, but we're doing what we can based on genuine scientific evidence to help him to fulfill his dream of finding out if there are any secrets remaining in the pyramid.
Yeah, love it. Do you think that it could have been built in the amount of time that it was supposed to be built? Do you think it could have been built by humans in 25 years?
I think he could.
Yeah.
I think there's an interesting, I think it's sort of interesting. I was just discussing with Bruce, the driver who brought me here yesterday, who's a really interesting guy, and he said that he was driving backwards and forwards across the causeway, across the bay here. I suppose it would be between Tampa Bay and Bradenton. And if you look at projects like that were completed in 5 years, which is, I know that they've got modern technology to do that now, but nonetheless, if you say it was with this amount of labor and it took them 5 years, but then you say, well, if you've got 20,000 people carefully managed, how long would it take you to build something like the pyramid? Quite possibly. And it depends on what the structure of the Great Pyramid is like, because you look at something and you say, oh, if we lay down these blocks one layer at a time, and then you think that would take you so long. But what if you only more or less build a facade effectively, as some people have suggested, where if you get into the deeper parts, you've got a mountain of rubble or something. We don't know. If you're using clever techniques, but I think it takes it takes almost otherworldly skills in human beings to plan it and to execute it so you get everybody together at the same time. These days we would be doing it with spreadsheets and Gantt charts and PERT analysis, whatever.
Sure.
But I think if you have somebody who's really sharp and you've got a well-trained team, it's like doing military things. Let's say if you've got a well-drilled team, you can do it very quickly. So I think it's possible. Say 20,000 people, 20 years, but you've all got to be really sort of pulling together. And I think this is a case of saying, this is why it's a case of not only are people doing it, it's got to be, everybody's got to be highly motivated, because if you've got people who are forced to do things against their will, they may just do the bare minimum. Whereas if you said we're taking 20,000 people who truly believe that their lives and their afterlives are dominated by how well the pharaoh does, and you're that highly motivated, you're going to work hard, you're going to work more efficiently, you're going to learn more. So perhaps it's just the most fantastic example of project planning and execution and people working together that ever existed, in which case 20,000 people, 20 years, perfectly feasible.
Yeah, makes sense. Good. Well, I love your perspective. I think with that was a great kind of opening and first conversation on the shafts and the King's and the Queen's Chamber, but probably ready to take a quick lunch break and then come back and then talk about the big void.
Whatever you want to do, whenever you want to do it.
All right, let's do it. Good. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So we'll dive into the big void now, or do you like to call it the large cavity or the big void?
I'm quite funny about naming things, and I like to avoid naming things particularly because, for example, right now we don't know for sure that there is a big void as such, and even so, I would rather say what we discover will be what we discover as opposed to what somebody else has discovered. So I'd just rather give it a more generic name, but it doesn't make any difference. We have to. It's good to. I think we should start with acknowledging the great work that the Scan Pyramids project has done in the pyramid.
Can you actually mention and explain how you are different than the Scan Pyramids team? Because I think there's some confusion there.
There's a link. There are links, and there is confusion. So, going back to the old days of the Jedi Pyramid robot exploration, Jean-Pierre Houdin had introduced us to Dassault System. Dassault System sponsored a lot of the Jedi work. And after a few years, there was a reorganization at Dassault System where they decided that they weren't going to support Jedi anymore. It's just about every 3 years they have a shake-up of the organization. The two guys at Dassault System that we worked with directly were Richard Breitner and Mehdi Tayyoubi. After we'd finished with Jedi, Mehdi started to set up another organization, which became Scan Pyramids. And I was invited to be part of that organization. And to a certain extent, they had got a lot of credibility because obviously Mehdi had been, or Dassault System had been associated with the good work that we'd done on Jedi in the first place. So they got a little bit of an in there. So I was invited to be part of that organization. And I said, I think it was that I really wanted to have more control over what was being done rather than being just a part of that organization. And at the same time, we were researching things in parallel, the techniques that we would apply to the pyramid. So one thing that Jean-Pierre needed for his theory was thermographic images of the pyramid close up. As far as I know, I was the first person to go onto the plateau and grab these images so we could look at the temperature of the pyramid at night time, which would give you clues about internal structure. I also carried out independent research of the muon tomography, which is the sort of X-ray technique that they eventually used in parallel with that as well. Any application that I put in was generally associated with Zahi Hawass, who was out of favour at the time. And the Scan Pyramids then went off and did their thing without my involvement. And so that's how we are separate, but we are combined. It comes effectively from the same point. And then as Scan Pyramids work ramped down, having done all of the non-invasive work, if you like, using only those techniques which were myography and thermal imaging. And then there's that's as far as they were going to go, and then and then Zahi Hawass had obviously said the right things and come up with the right ideas and plans for us to get back involved in it. So we're completely separate now from Scan Pyramids. So the work that they did, just to reiterate the main point, and this is very important, is to give a bit of background of myography, muon topography. It's like a 3D X-ray, and the way that it works is that all of the time you have got muons passing through you. You might have thousands every minute. These muons, they are caused by cosmic rays, and they come from all over space, interacting with our atmosphere, and they give off other particles. These particles can penetrate very far through. They can easily go through us, and they can relatively easily go through stone and rock. And so by placing detectors on the other side of stone or rock from where the cosmic rays are coming from, it's just like taking an X-ray. So you can sort of see bright spots, shadows, that sort of thing. And that's the basic technology behind it. And they use various different techniques. And the good thing is that two things came out of that. two objects, if you like, two interesting areas in the pyramid. They can't resolve down tiny features, but they can get a good idea about relatively large spaces. One was what they call the North Face corridor, which was, it's not a surprise, is that on the side of the pyramid there's a structure effectively at the main entrance, which has got a gabled entrance. It's not a surprise that there's a structure, a sort of a hollow structure beyond there. But the muon tomography showed that, and when they put a much larger endoscope than we use, when they put the camera through there, they saw that indeed there was a cavity there, which is validating the technique. What's more exciting is that they discovered a much larger void somewhere above the Grand Gallery. And this doesn't seem to be just a figment of the technique, although there was a slight chance that there's a way that you could produce this shadow without there being anything there. But it seems like that is a real cavity. And
what percent chance do you think that it's a real cavity?
I'd say more than 90%.
More than 90?
Yeah.
Okay.
So so we can have some confidence there is something left to find. Now the question is, what is that cavity? If we could guess at it now, and we could say it could be anything from just an infill of lower density rubble. Say, for example, in a space that they used for construction of the pyramid. Or it could be anywhere as exciting as, a whole funerary chamber of the scale of Tutankhamun's treasure and beyond. That's the interesting thing. The challenging thing is trying to work out exactly what that looks like and how we get access to it. And that's what I've spent a lot of the last few years thinking about.
You know where it is, almost exactly, I guess?
Well, not almost exactly, because you end up with a sort of a cloud. It's almost like a fuzzy cloud, and you'd have to do an awful lot more surveying using muon tomography to get anywhere near an accurate depiction. And you could do that over like 20 years or something like that, I guess. But we have other techniques that we can bring to bear on it to start to narrow down the shape and the location. And I believe it was my idea, although, sometimes you get things in your head and you think, well, I had this idea all along, but it might have been somebody else may have already suggested it. But the guy, Jan Franke, who is the GPR expert, he does a lot of his he does a lot of his survey work with GPRs, which are effectively like ropes, and I decided to call them snakes because they look like snakes to me. So you have two say 37 centimeter long rectangular blocks, and you have a connecting material in between, and they might be between 3 and 6 meters long. And these are radars, so one end sends out a radar pulse, and the other, so it's like the head of the snake sends out a radar pulse and the tail of the snake receives it. And you can detect anything within, well, say 30 meters away from wherever you put it. The disadvantage of these is that because they are not shielded, so they are firing out the radar in any direction, is that you get a return from any direction, and you only know that there's an object within a certain distance away. You couldn't say what direction it's in. It's like sending out a cylinder of a sensing cylinder, if you like. But the advantage is these things are so narrow that we can almost use them to do keyhole surgery or keyhole investigation, because we have 4 places in the pyramid where we can access with these snakes, and that's the shafts that we've been discussing. So my idea was that if we can, first of all, send these radars up the shafts, we know what sort of signal we should be getting depending on which shaft we put it into, if that makes sense. So first of all, you guess where the cavity is. And then you say, okay, I'm seeing something approaching, going away. And then that gives you a clue. And if you do that from enough positions, you can start to build up an estimated 3D picture. So that's the first thing that we will do, is we'll send these radars up the shafts. And we have done that already.
The 4 shafts.
Up the 4 shafts, yeah.
Kings, queens, north, south, north, south.
Yeah. So you can imagine with that, you can start to get an estimate. But we're also working on a sort of a tomographic technique where you could have one radar positioned, say, on the outside of the pyramid and one radar inside the shaft. And then you can start to see what's happening between them. And then you use a little bit of clever maths, and then you can work it out. So,
but don't you know that it's not? It's either on the south side or the north side. Do you know which side it's on yet, north or south?
Yes, we do. So it's definitely on the north side. But we're going to look in all. We're going to look in all of them, because what we can resolve a lot better. We can resolve a lot clearly. So the key shaft would be shaft I in that diagram, which is, the shaft closest to the eye, which is the King's Chamber northern side. And if you look just below there, the red and the green shadows, that's the possible locations of where the big void, as Scan Pyramids called it, would be.
And by going up C, you should be able to kind of pinpoint whether or not it's horizontal or kind of 45 degrees.
Yeah. So you start to get a feel for where it is. But because we can identify smaller structures, you might send something up D or B and find something
else.
Because there are clues. There are clues in the shafts that suggest that there might be other interesting structures in there. But if we focus only on that cavity for now, that's our immediate interest, is to see how far away the cavity is from the shaft, and then to work that out in relation to any possible access points. So remember that our key is to do minimally invasive. It's really not to harm the pyramid in any way if we can. So we look for all sorts of cracks, gaps, whatever we can use to get as close as possible to that space. And so it's really a case of gathering as much information as we can to try to narrow it down.
So a most likely scenario would be going through the shaft, through like some either already existing crack within within either I or C.
I wouldn't say within the shaft. I know that people have sort of suggested that that's a possibility, unless we find that one of the cracks is particularly helpful, so that we can have like a long wire endoscope, say. My best guess at the moment is I have to be a little bit careful because I can't really talk about unpublished results. But if you look at the the King's Chamber, if you look at the lower right-hand side of the King's Chamber, there's what's called an antechamber, and behind that is where the Italian explorer Caviglia started digging, because he wanted to find out where this shaft went to. So there's already a big man-made tunnel which extends into the bottom part of that northern shaft. So it's not in a place that is sort of has any beauty. We know it's been damaged already, and there's a possibility that radar surveys in there show that there are big voids, big cavities beyond that. So it may be that within there one can deploy either a very a sort of a flexible snake and send it up towards where the cavity is, or it may be that we can drill something as small as 15 millimeters diameter, which is really not big in the scheme of things inside the pyramid.
half inch or so.
And within that we can insert a micro robot, which is one of the things that you've been helping with.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea with this micro robot is that it's pencil shaped, but when it gets beyond through the inside of the drill diameter, when it gets out the other side, legs pop out. So it's got what you call wegs, which are a combination of wheels and legs, which means that it's got a lot of maneuverability. So it could go several meters into any cavity that we find. So I'm just talking about in general terms here. Obviously, whatever we do would be dependent upon what we find. But I suppose what I'm saying is I'm speculating about what technique we can use depending on what we find and what the authorities allow us to do. All we can say is we feel that this is the gentlest, the best way to discover things inside the pyramid. This is our professional approach, but it's not up to us what is allowed. We can only advise and then be ready to do something when we're allowed to.
Okay, so the general shape and size of the void, I've heard that it's estimated to be about the size of 2 semi-trucks. And so with it just being shadows and with it just being kind of estimates based on this muon technology, how close to accurate is that? Do we know?
I think we can be more than. I think we would say that it's more than 50% likely that we would be looking at something which would be, say, 40 meters long by 4 by 4 meters. So
okay,
it would be equivalent, effectively, of finding a grand gallery above the grand gallery.
Right.
And for anybody who's been in the pyramid, you will realise what an impressive space, what an impressive volume the grand gallery is. Because as you ascend into the pyramid, I think if one is claustrophobic, you think, well, this is a little bit tight. But then when it opens up into the grand gallery, it's almost like entering into a cathedral. And it's that sort of impressive volume. So imagine if there is another, even if it's just another grand gallery for whatever reason, again, it would give a clue about the purpose of the galleries. But that's the sort of scale that we're looking at, and we can be fairly confident about that. And then the question is, would you find a similar space as the grand gallery, or would it be split up into smaller spaces? It's unusual to have a long, sort of relatively narrow, relatively low height thing. Grand gallery is one thing. One large tunnel wouldn't make a lot of sense, just a single large tunnel. So it may be split up into rooms. If it's split up into rooms, that makes it even more interesting, because then you say, if it's split up into rooms, you are into the realms of not just construction chambers or construction routes, but rooms that were planned to be in there, and that makes it very exciting to consider. If there were rooms that were planned to be in there, what might they be?
And how could you even get to them? Right. I mean, the Grand Gallery has passages and walkways.
How did they get to them in the first place?
Yeah. Or were they just built into the pyramid and sealed as the pyramid's layers began to be built? Or is there some other passageway or chamber from somewhere else?
Well, that's the question.
Yeah.
That's the big question. And one of the things about the Great Pyramid is that almost everything that has been discovered has been accidental, effectively. Things have been hidden fairly well, and you would, for example, if you'd approach the, let's say, if you'd approach the pyramid, if you were the first person to break into the pyramid via the main entranceway, not by the robbers' tunnel, ignoring the robbers' tunnel, if you'd done that, you would have just walked down that passageway into the subterranean chamber, found it empty probably, and gone, I'm not staying here. I'm going back out. That's the position we are in with the pyramid as it is now. There's nothing to say. There's absolutely nothing to say that we couldn't be in the same position as those original visitors. And if one of those visitors had stopped and noticed a particular stone in the ceiling and decided to chisel through it, they would have seen the granite blocks which were blocking the ascending passageway. And that would have given them a clue that there was something to get around to go up there. But right now we're just in that position where any one of those blocks that we currently see in the pyramid that looks like an innocent looking block, and there's at least one in the King's Chamber, when you look at it carefully, you could say, that's a strange block. And then if you removed it, it would be the same as we have now, where it's obvious where you go through. It's obvious you go to the top of the Grand Gallery and go into the King's Chamber. But if the block was still there, it wouldn't be obvious that you go through. So now all of the tourists go up there, they go to the top of the Grand Gallery, they go into the horizontal passageway and the antechamber of the King's Chamber. It seems like it's been there forever, but of course it hasn't been there forever because it wasn't discovered until the tomb raiders had decided to remove whatever block was blocking that in the first place. So it could be that you, instead of doing what you do now, which is you go up into the King's Chamber, you walk into the King's Chamber, this is really amazing, it's a fantastic space, that's it. Instead of that, you turn right, and then you turn right again through another low passageway, and then you end up out into this big cavity, whatever it is. There's nothing to say that there isn't something there. And they never advertised any of their passageways to ordinary people. There are clues, but there's nothing to say this must be a passageway. So my point is, it's quite feasible that there are other passageways that we're just not aware of, and they are accessed by places that people go day in, day out and think nothing of them. But there's a block that if only you thought to move it, you could be into something amazing. So yeah.
How far are we from the technology that's required to do a proper scan of the entire pyramid and really know, even define the little shafts, the 20 by 20 centimeter shafts?
Yes. So there was a sort of a limitation on physics, and the general rule is that if you want to look deep, you can't look at with high resolution. So if you have a metal detector, for example, and you want to you want to find a coin, you can't find a coin with a great big metal detecting antenna because the wavelength is just wrong for picking up a coin. So you have to have a smaller antenna. If you've got a smaller antenna, it doesn't see very deep. So typically, say if you're talking about metal detectors, and that's an analog for anything else that you could think of, if I want to detect small things, I can't detect small things very deep. I can detect really deep, but I can't detect small things. So really, how far away are we, other than sort of synthetic aperture radar type devices or more complicated devices and things that haven't been discovered yet? I think we're as close as we can possibly do it with the technology that we have.
Okay.
It's just physics.
Okay. And so all of the work that needs to be done to kind of scan and to pinpoint where exactly the void is and how you're going to enter it non-invasively, all of that preparation work, when do you see that kind of starting and finishing?
Well, I see it starting a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
I saw it starting a couple of years ago. So, for example, we can say we found things that don't work. We found areas where there probably isn't anything. We found things that are interesting and are worth looking at more. So it's the same as ever, is that there's a lot of bits and pieces of work, and then all of a sudden it comes together in one go. I would say that we've got our techniques pretty much, we know what we're doing now. And over the next two missions in October and December is we will test those out and start to narrow in. And then regarding cavities, it would be a case of then presenting those. We would probably have enough results to present to the authorities and say this is our estimate of where there are any cavities that are worth accessing. So we're very close to doing it. Again, with technology, you don't know. It's not Hollywood. You can't. It's not. It works every time, and sometimes it's an estimate. But definitely close to doing it. And frankly, I don't want it to drag on too much longer because I've been doing it for 21 years. So I'd like to sort of close this chapter. And if there's anything to be discovered, I'd like to do it over the next 12 months for sure.
And you feel like 2026 is the year when we get into the big void?
Yes, I think. As long as we get the permissions to do that, we can work out where to go. We have the technology to do it. So I'm confident about that. But I always have some reservations just because you don't know the situation. Back in 2010, once we got to that stage, we were going to kick on and start doing more. The initial things that we did with Jedi were just the starting point. We could not have predicted the Arab Spring. We could not have predicted what had happened to the politics of the situation. So I'm always I'm optimistic, but I'm also realistic. But one of the things that we excel at is perseverance. So if we don't do it in 2026, we'll do it in the next year. But I'm confident that we could do it in 2026 with permissions, etc.
And so if it is where you think that it is, if it is, if the scan is that you've got and the data that you got is completely accurate and the void is where you think that it is, and I won't hold you to this, but of course, but what do you think the best entry point would be based on what you know right now?
So it would be this Caviglia, the Caviglia tunnel. It's a great space that's already been abused by tomb raiders.
Yeah.
It takes you a certain distance up the back to you sort of turn back on yourself going up towards the Grand Gallery. You're ending up pointing in the right direction. It looks like there could be cavities there that we can make use of. I think it would be that. You still would need to. You've still got to access maybe 8 meters. But if you can get through those 8 meters and you're into a big void, and then we can pop something through it, then I want to be in a position where if we pop something through it and we see a little door, that we can have something crawl towards that door rather than guess what it is. Mm-hmm. When they first put the camera through the north face corridor, they could sort of see things off in the distance, and it was tantalizing because they couldn't look all the way across that space. We want to be able to get through that whatever space it is, and if there's something on the other side of it, also to go through that. But if it's rubble, that would make it more difficult. But if it's a chamber, we just set off and start exploring the chamber.
And so the estimate on it is, you said 4 meters by 4 meters by 40 meters. Mm-hmm. Is that basically the size of the Grand Gallery?
It's a similar length to the Grand Gallery, a little bit wider, I think, and a little bit shorter.
Sure, yeah.
Right. But we don't know because. It could be, there's something interesting in the Grand Gallery which sometimes, I think a lot of people would not notice it, but on either side of the Grand Gallery, at possibly about that same sort of height, like 4 meters above the floor level, there is a recessed groove, a few inches maybe, and it's possible. Yeah, so you can see the recessed groove where it's been cut away. If you sort of go from where the cable ducting is above to the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one, and then it's just above there, and you can see somebody's hacked into it at some point to remove whatever was there. You've got to assume that there was something in there that was worth hacking out. So whether that was a false ceiling. With stuff above it.
Oh yeah, could be.
And the question is, what was there? So it may be that would also affect any technique that had been used, including, depending on what was there, that could affect the tomography. And so it's possible that it would just be another space that was like the Grand Gallery with its ceiling at that level. Nobody knows why that was the case. But one thing we want to do is run a radar as well along the top of the Grand Gallery, just to look sort of 3 meters into it, just so that we know exactly how the Grand Gallery terminates. So we've got it's always good to find things in the pyramid where you've got something that you could compare. So, if you've got a shaft on the north side, do you have a shaft on the south side? If you have a shaft in the King's Chamber, do you have shafts in the Queen's Chamber, as Wayman Dixon rightfully thought? So all of these things, it's a little bit like a detective story, where you've got clues and you've got to sort of try and put them together. So we try to use the clues to get as much information as possible. Other people might see clues that we don't see, and I'm always interested in other people's opinion, because I know a lot of people are very sort of selfish about it, but I would rather say, let me have your opinion about it, or what do you feel as though we need to look for? And I do that with people who obviously know what they're talking about. I like to ask them, what do you think we should be looking for? That's how I ended up contacting Jean-Pierre Houdin in the first place. Was he'd got an interesting theory of the internal ramp for creating the pyramid. And I said, I just asked him what was, whether it would be, is there anything we should be looking for while we're shuttling up and down inside these shafts? As it turns out, he said that he didn't really need any information from in the shafts. But through that connection, then obviously we made connections with other organizations and other people. So we're totally open. We're not, in case we give the impression otherwise, we're not sort of like a hidden organization or something. We haven't got anything to hide. I'm always happy to hear from people who either have ideas or think that it's worthwhile collecting particular bits of information. I'm not sure that we can always do it, but I will usually take it on board, and it sort of gives me food for thought for if we are looking at something, for example. So to give you an example, things that we've discovered ourselves that other people might point out, but we've discovered for ourselves. And I think that it's okay to talk about this, because it's not so much of a discovery, because it's known. It's been known about since Pyramid Rover drove up the Queen's Chamber northern shaft. Is there are some stains on the walls of the shaft, which to me look very interesting. So they're probably about 3/4 of the way up the shaft, and they're a unusual sort of purpley brown colour, and it's that sort of observation that makes one think, what does this mean? What might there be locally? And we have our own theories about that. But I suppose my point is, sometimes you just don't notice things because you're busy looking at the next target or whatever. So it's useful always to talk to other people and get as many ideas as possible. And we don't have any axe to grind. We don't have any theories that we're trying to prove. No narrative. It's just really what is the best scientific and engineering way to find out what is there beyond that. It's not for us to say. Again, it's anybody's guess.
Right. And is that stain the same color as the writing, the 121?
No, it's not. So those marks are in a red ochre, and they're very obviously a red ochre. We get used to looking at the different colors of things. I've seen those floors so often. What made this stand out to me was that it's not the same as red ochre. It's not the same as natural iron that comes out of limestone and sort of sometimes you get it so that it looks like little splashes of red paint, which it isn't. It is natural iron sort of coming out of stones and reacting. This is something that's almost as if it's like, the best way that I could put it was almost as if you'd put a pool of water over the shaft, over a stone. It settled there, and it had been immersed in something for some time. And I'm not going to speculate what that thing is, but other people could speculate what it is. And limestone is like a sponge. And so as the water with this material in has soaked down in that sponge, it's left a sort of a tide mark at one point, which is not parallel with the shaft. It is not parallel with the ground. It's almost as if it's just spread out from one particular pool. And then, of course, that's an area of interest. Anything like that, which is a sort of a clue, because a lot of things in the pyramid are, that's an accidental clue, but I think there's a lot of spaces in the pyramid where it's obvious that something has happened. Now, whether they changed the geometry so there was a clue for themselves as to where hidden passageways were, but as you go through the pyramid, you can see, for example, sometimes when you're walking through a corridor, the gaps in the stones will always be perpendicular to the floor, perpendicular, 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 then upright. And then sometimes that's for structural reasons, but sometimes it just seems to be a clue as to where the passageways, where the other passageways are. So we're always looking out for clues, essentially.
Yeah, one of the crazy, I gave you a crazy theory when you emailed the team about it, that maybe similar to the red stuff that's on the walls in South America at Sacsayhuaman between the stones and whatnot, but that maybe it could be the same material if it was, if it was a global civilization that, that.
Well, that would be interesting, and say a lot of people will dismiss those sort of things out of hand without even thinking about it. But I would tend to think, okay, let's say that was the theory. What would we need to find to demonstrate that? I think we would want to see it in more blocks, say, for example.
Right.
And I think in this case, in that case, the case you mentioned, that's somewhere where they almost wanted to impress people by having close-fitting jigsaw puzzles. So you would expect the shaft geometry also to be the same, where it's all very tight. Mm-hmm. We know that it's not, but we don't know that it wasn't intended to be super tight, because everything shifts. Like over the years, we know that there have been earthquakes, and we know that things have shifted in the pyramid. So just because one block doesn't necessarily fit next to the other doesn't mean that at one point it didn't fit really nicely next to the other block. We can't know. On the balance of probabilities, it's not something like that, but I'm always happy to consider that and to listen to what other people have to say. Why not?
Yeah, because we have to.
Yeah. Otherwise, where will we get if we've only got one theory and we're sticking to that theory?
Right. So what would you say to people, again, on the big void specifically, because I hear this a lot, that if Hawass is letting people into the big void or letting people explore the big void, then he already knows what's in there. And so, I mean, it's just based on the process that you're going through of getting this thing explored with everything that has to happen from a scientific standpoint. It just seems so improbable that all of that's been done already by some other group and explored. But I want to let you answer the question.
I think it sounds like a wonderful idea that somehow there's people have this knowledge and they're not prepared to say anything about it. So let's say that Hawass had discovered something in I suppose I would turn the question around and say, what has he got to hide? If it's a great discovery, is Hawass the sort of person that would not want to publicize that to the world? I think he would want to publicize that to the world. And if it's something like ancient technology that is hiding, why would he say, I want you to lead the team that is looking inside there, knowing that, we're pretty competent. So if there is something to find, we will find it.
Right.
It doesn't make a lot of sense. But again, I don't think I could change anybody's mind about it. I think people are just going to have their theories and stick to it. It would be very rare that you would change anybody's mind about that. But I love the idea of it.
It's very.
I love the idea of people thinking that maybe I might have some secret knowledge that I'm not telling people. But I'm again probably I'd be, if I find anything, I'm quite keen to publicize it, and of course through the formal channels as usual.
Yeah. I mean, if we play that out, if he had already made this discovery and he already knows what's in there, and maybe he found it empty, why wouldn't he just say, I've made this discovery and here's the entrance?
Exactly.
And if he found something in it and he took it out, then, which is super conspiratorial, then why not just say, I found it empty and here it is? Same answer.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
I don't get it.
And let's say that you take something out of the pyramid. Well, I mean, where are you gonna put it? Where are you gonna? I think if you do a crime, one of the most difficult things is fencing the goods, and these things would come to light. You're not going to get something. I can't really see how you could possibly get away with it. Maybe if you sort of knew a billionaire who's desperate for ancient artifacts or UFOs or whatever, you could persuade them to buy it and keep it secretly. But I just think things get seen. You know, there are eyes everywhere around the pyramid. You know, it's. I think it would be difficult to find a way to smuggle anything significant out of the pyramid. Personally, it's difficult to get access to spaces. I've looked at stones all over the pyramid. It's difficult to think where anybody would get in anywhere to get anything out, and that would become super apparent to anybody who would, you know, if they've walked on the outside of the pyramid, as our colleagues have, or been viewing it with telescopes as our colleagues have, or trying to find access into little cracks as we have. It's just really difficult to find how they would have got in. Anybody could have got in the first place and then smuggled something out and then put it all back. Mm-hmm. You know, that takes more. Imagine it's hard enough just getting in the first place. Never mind all of the work that is necessary to close it all back up and then make it look as though nobody's been in. So again, it's all wonderful. It's a fantastic idea, but doesn't seem. I don't think it's possible.
And would it be possible? I had a guest on who said that he had heard from a person, and that there was a tunnel from the town somewhere from
Zamalek under Zahi's office.
Oh, that one too. That one, yeah. I think that was a different one.
Oh,
but,
right.
Yeah, but then there's another one that goes directly under the Great Pyramid and straight up to the Big Void. And when I asked him, you know, where was the evidence for this, there wasn't really.
No. So I think if there was a significant tunnel, that would be seen in the muon tomography.
Right.
Anyway.
Right.
You could say, well, it's filled in and there's only man-sized space there, which wouldn't appear in the tomography. But it doesn't seem likely. And there's a lot of independent organisations that have carried out radar. So you'd have to be quite deep. If you go quite deep, you're actually into the water level of the Nile anyway. So you know it can't be more than, say, 20 metres. You've got a tunnel, but not only a tunnel, but something that effectively goes through water. So you've got to shore that up. It starts to become a little bit impractical. It really is hard enough just doing anything around the pyramid. Never mind never mind them having built secret tunnels and things, or great cities beneath the pyramid. People want something more amazing. They forget how amazing it is, and I don't think you need anything more amazing than the pyramid itself. It's already fabulous. Yeah. It boggles the mind. It would be everything else would be a sort of the icing on the cake, and the best chance we have of finding. Well, no. Let's put it another way. the best keeper of the secret of the pyramid is not Hawass or organizations or secret organizations or whatever. It's the pyramid itself. Yeah. And you know, that's the challenge to find out what the pyramid is hiding. And that's reality. It's hiding something. We know that. So that's what we want to find out. We don't want to find out anything else that we don't know it might be hiding or we're speculating. We know the science is pointing to there's something in there, a cavity in there. We know that there should be a gap behind that blocking stone in the northern shaft, and that's what we're focusing on. Maybe in the future it would be fun to look at other areas around the pyramid, but for now, that's far more than we need to be doing. You know, that's far more work. That's enough work to keep us going for a long time. And discovering any one thing in any one of those spaces would be something phenomenal. And I think it would be it's a testament to the builders if they have put even more structures in there, because it's already the most amazing ancient building in the world.
Yeah. So your wildest speculation, or your highest probability rather, for what the big void is, another grand gallery, or a tomb, or a treasure, or what's your highest probability?
Well, it depends on which way that you. So the highest probability, I would say it would be something that is, if you purely take the dimensions, it seems to me it's a set of It could be a set of chambers. Now, whether they are empty chambers, I don't know. Whether a tomb raider had managed to get in and taken something out, we don't know. But that would be my best guess. It's a set of chambers. Construction tunnel is good, and it's an interesting theory, but I think if it were being backfilled with rubble, it would not be showing the clear difference between stone and not stone. If it's quite a big structure, then it might well be corbelled in the same way as the Grand Gallery. So it might look like a series of corbelled structures. So that's it. I'm not thinking, treasure or anything like that. I'm just thinking, how amazing would it be just to discover any space, and it means that they've done an even better job than they appear to have done now. It's just such a phenomenal. The Great Pyramid is an anomaly in building. So if you think about just like in a couple of generations to go from deciding to take like a mastaba and then putting another mastaba on top of it to turn it into the step pyramid, and then you get to the peak, the pinnacle, which is the Great Pyramid, which added in so many features that weren't in any other pyramid, then that's just totally, again, coming back to it, it's out of this world, phenomenal. I couldn't even begin to think and get my head around how somebody would go about planning and executing such an amazing feat of civil engineering. So as much as it'd be nice to find something exotic, I think I'd be happy to find anything at all.
What about the Royal Cubit system you mentioned, that metrological system? And so the Queen's Chamber shafts are both 121 Royal Cubits. Are the King's Chamber shafts? Yeah.
So the way that what happened is obviously different cubit measurements were used in different places. So the way we can be confident is that you look at the dimensions of everything in the pyramid. So we call it a pyramid. Let's call it a pyramid cubit. And you find that things are measured to within, whole measurements, which might be 37.5 centimeters or whatever. That's just a random example. And then if you find that there's so many things that are measured at 37.5 centimeters, that would be a cubit, say, for that particular structure, because that's what they've been using. So we know that that's an accepted length within the pyramid. So if you look at the dimensions of chambers, of corridors, they're all done to whole cubits or sensible fractions of cubits. Mm-hmm. So we can be fairly confident. Now it could just be coincidental, but we can say that the measurements are pretty accurate to that number of cubits, like within a few centimeters. So what are the chances of that?
Very small. Yeah. The King's Chamber is 10 by 20 Royal Cubits. Yeah. And so I hadn't realized that the shafts were 121, 11 square. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And the Royal Cubit, the one that was used for the construction of the Great Pyramid is 52.4 centimeters. And they have a subunit of that is the Royal Finger.
Yeah.
And the Royal Finger is 18.71 millimeters, so 1.871 centimeters.
Yeah.
And the vases, several of the vases actually measure out in Royal Fingers.
Right.
So they were using the same metrological system for the manufacturing of the vases.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Perfect sense.
Yeah. It's one of our discoveries that kind of mainstream has kind of passed over and hasn't measured any of the ones in museums. But
I think that's a very interesting observation, and yes, of course, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Especially as I think again, you've got to understand the culture, and the culture is such that writing and mathematics were considered to be special magical things. So if you think about that culture, and then one, it's sort of convenient to have a unit of measurement, so people would find, oh, look at the people of the 2000s that were using meters or feet or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's sort of understandable to do it practically, but I suspect it takes on even more importance when you are somebody who considers numbers to be magical. So that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
And of course, we sort of saw these measurements fairly early on, because a lot of people certainly back in the 1800s and early 1900s believed that the time and the truth of things like the Bible were encoded into the pyramid. And we have these people to thank for cleaning out the pyramids and for measuring them. Flinders Petrie's father, I think, was very convinced of this, and that's one of the reasons why Flinders Petrie got into Egyptology in the first place. And his measurements are still, one of the gold standards of measurements in the pyramid. So we've known about the sort of consistency of measurements in the pyramid for a long time. Why not have it across all things, special things?
Yeah. Well, good. Well, what is next for you after these next two projects? They're big projects coming up, but then what are you looking forward to after that?
First of all, I'm looking forward to sort of drawing a line under the pyramid stuff. And I always have a list of other projects that I've working on. And what I find is that my work is not just in Egyptology and archaeology; it's in space and other areas as well, treasure hunting to a certain extent. And so I've basically got a list of things that I want to look at. So, say in Egyptology, let's call it Egyptology. One of the things that really, I would say irritates me, but it's not. Irritate is not the right word. It sort of plants a seed in my head, as it were, is when something goes missing that is something amazing, and it's a shame that it's gone missing for the want of a bit of effort to find it. So I've sort of found, if you like, real world treasures in that way. So I'd found something like a gold medallion that had belonged to the water speed record holder. Somebody called Donald Campbell in the UK. He was trying to do 300 miles an hour on water. He crashed. His gold medallion sank to the bottom of the lake, still around his neck. And 37 years later, they found his body, and they brought it up, and they gave the gold medallion to his daughter. And this had come from his father to him, to the daughter. So it was like a dynasty of world speed record holders. And she had lost it. And I thought, this is one of these things that bugged me. Something so important that had disappeared after having been rescued, etc. So I decided that I was going to find it. It was an almost impossible task. And I'm not going to go into the details because it's on my website if anybody wanted to look. But found it. And that was like a 1 in a million chance that we would find it. My wife and I discovered it together effectively. I like things like that. And one of those things, the example at the moment that sort of fills my headspace was the disappearance of the Menkaure sarcophagus.
Right.
And the guy who had discovered the hieroglyphs in the relieving chambers above the king's chamber in the pyramid, he had shipped Menkaure's, it was like a black granite sarcophagus, and he sent it off on a ship, and it was going from Malta to UK, and it disappeared. And there's hardly anything else in the story about it. So this was beautifully ornate sarcophagus, sunk somewhere, yeah.
The whole ship sunk, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just disappeared. Nobody knows where it is. And Howard Weiss himself had said it just disappeared off Cartagena, I suppose you pronounce it, Cartagena, in Spain. But he didn't know for sure that's where it went to. And I'm thinking, how difficult is it to find it? It turns out it's very difficult to find it because none of the records seem to be accurate, and I've looked around everywhere. But what my plan is fortunately the people who are interested in climate change have decided that they would do something to prove it or to investigate it, and so what they've done is they gathered together all historical weather records going back to something like 1820, and this happened in 1838. And so they would collect ships' records and things like that. But also techniques have been developed where you can reverse forecast the weather. So we're recreating the weather for the period that the ship sailed, so we can simulate the speed that the ship would have been able to do, and where the bad weather was. And then rather than just guessing where it is, somewhere in the Mediterranean, somewhere in the Bay of Biscay, you can say, if it was sailing at approximately this speed, this is where it might have sank. And then you just go to those spots. And then rather than having thousands of square miles, you might narrow it down to a couple of 100 square miles, something like that, which is sort of doable. And that would be something that I would really like to do, because we relatively recently got into looking for shipwrecks and things like that. So, I think that would combine the Egyptology and the more sort of nautical research side of things. So that's one thing that I want to get into. And then I want to.
Where would it go if you found it? Where would it go?
People always say, "Oh, well, it's priceless, so you'll make millions out of it or whatever." But obviously, it doesn't belong to the finder, so it depends on where it's found. What I would want to do with it, obviously, is to put it back into the Egyptian museum where it belongs. I don't necessarily think it was right that it was going to be shipped off to the British Museum in the first place. So the trouble is, if it's found, say, in Spanish waters, then they might have a claim on it. But I'm assuming it's in open waters, and I'm assuming if we found it, then the insurance company wouldn't necessarily have a claim on it. And then I think it would be really nice either to put it back into Menkaure's pyramid or just put it back into the Egyptian museum. But it's nothing. It's got nothing. I don't really care about the. I don't care about the sort of treasure aspect of it, if you like. I only care about solving the mystery and discovering things. That's what drives me through all of my it's the one strand through all of the work that I do. Is I'm just fascinated by discovering things and how you with the process you have to go to discover it. Once that's done, I'm just moving on to the next thing. It's not like, oh, you know, this is going to change my life or something. It's just I'm driven to discover.
Love it. Love it. Good stuff. Great attitude. That was a wonderful conversation. I mean, really and truly, really appreciate it. Appreciate everything you're doing. Your great perspective, a lot of fascinating, phenomenal projects that you got working on. There was one more.
All right.
I wanted to. You're sending some of my hair samples to the moon.
Your DNA is going to the moon. Yeah.
What can you talk about that project?
Yeah,
real quick?
yeah. So everything is connected.
Yeah.
When Dassault System were sponsoring the Pyramid project, they were sponsoring some other projects, and there's this wonderful French artist called Anne-Laure Banon, and she had created a statue, a commemoration to the D-Day landings on Omaha Beach. So it's American soldiers, and the key thing with that was a lot of people, especially men, said to her, "It can't be done. You couldn't do this great big sculpture on Omaha Beach." And she said, "Well, I'll find out how to do it." And she worked out how to do it. So she sort of got used to building something difficult to do in a hostile place, especially where other people had said you can't do it. And when she went over to the States promoting this, she got talking to astronauts who said, "You know what, you should put a sculpture on the moon." And she had no idea about how to put a sculpture on the moon, but she thought, well, you know, again, I've done something where people said I couldn't do it, so I'll find out. And the guys at Dassault Systèmes said, well, you know what, you should speak to Shaun Whitehead because he knows a little bit about space. And so I started working with her. And I said we'll do it in different stages. So we did one on the edge of space, like on a high altitude balloon. So we sent a very delicate sculpture to the edge of space. And I wanted to put one into orbit before we put it on the moon, just a small thing. And I thought it's going to be like relatively easy to put it into orbit. And it turns out that it wasn't that easy to put it into orbit. Despite all my working in space, if you want to put anything into orbit, it's really difficult. People won't just sort of easily fly it. It might take years or whatever. So one branch of that was I decided to build my own little satellites so that people who wanted access to space for a short time could build whatever mission they wanted to, put it into orbit, and that became what I call ThumbSat, because the satellite is no bigger than the human thumb, and it means that you don't have to bother with the paperwork or anything like that. So that was one branch of it. But the other was I had to find a lander that I thought was going to be capable of putting this thing on the moon and start talking to people. And it was at the time that nobody was really doing it, but there was something called the Google Lunar X Prize, where it actually started out as another X Prize competition, but I think Google started sponsoring it. And it was for private companies to put something on the moon. So I thought, I'm going to start following these companies, and I've got to almost place a bet on who's going to be the winner of this X Prize, because we're looking 6 or 7 years down the line. They're the people. So I started talking to a company called Astrobotic, and I thought, yeah, these have got the most chance of doing it. And then these things, you know, stretch out over years. And but Astrobotic, I got on well with them, and eventually they did get to the point where they're going to put payloads on the moon. So I thought, I've got to get something, the smallest thing on the moon, doesn't matter what it was. So I decided I'd been involved in enough space missions to know that the sort of something sort of big and relatively delicate, if it smashes into the moon at a few thousand miles an hour, then it's not going to be good for it. So I was thinking, well, what can I do that is going to be, what's the toughest thing that I can do? So I decided that we would manufacture a tungsten capsule, and tungsten is a super tough material if you design it right.
And pretty light.
Yeah, well, it's actually heavy, but I mean, for what it does, it's quite a dense sort of material. So So then so to cut a long story short, we flew a capsule which actually contained a sort of a treasure hunt. So it was the first interplanetary treasure hunt, which was designed to go on the moon on the Astrobotic Peregrine mission. That ended up going up to the orbit of the moon and then coming all the way back down to Earth. So it ended up landing in the breaking up over the Great Barrier Reef. But the fun thing with that is this little capsule that I built, which had DNA inside it and the treasure hunt on it, now is probably the only thing that survived. So at some point, some diver on the Great Barrier Reef is going to find this thing and go, that's a bit weird, isn't it? So that initial one, that's where that ended up. This next one with the Griffin lander, which is planned for the end of this year, I wanted to do it a little bit differently. So we built a similar capsule from tungsten. But I thought it's quite fun that a lot of people, talk about the pyramid being built by aliens. So let's do something to do with the pyramid on the moon. So what I've done with the DNA samples is to combine the DNA from tiny bits of hair fragments, particularly the roots, pack it into a sphere, which I thought was quite fun because, again, a lot of people are interested in the sort of how you could fit a sphere around the pyramid. So there's a sort of a parallel. But I've also taken some pyramid dust and compacted that into it as well. So we have a little bit of the pyramid, a little bit of our DNA on the moon, and so that's it. That's how you're going to get to the moon. And if it goes to the moon, as I say, I've designed it so that even if there's an impact and everything else is destroyed, then that tungsten capsule should survive pretty much forever, as far as certainly longer than the pyramid is going to last. And that's the story of that. But I love, I love the little challenges of doing that because it is something quite small engineering, quite difficult. Very much helped out by Ian Parker, who's working on the on the pyramid project. His manufacturing skills are fantastic. It makes it a lot easier for me if we've got somebody who's very competent at doing, different parts of the engineering. So, yeah, just one of many crazy projects like that.
That's cool. That was a fun email to get when you emailed me and said, hey, if you send me a couple of pieces of your hair, I'll send them to the moon.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay.
You don't get asked that every day, do you?
I don't get asked that every day.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
It was pretty special.
Good. So, yeah, well, you were among a select few, so...
That's pretty cool. Yeah, very good. Very good. No,
good.
Very much appreciative of that. That's very cool. And I want to thank Matt Stibson for connecting us,
yes,
actually.
Absolutely. I should have mentioned Matt. And the interesting connection with, I didn't realize this, there's a connection with Matt, going all the way back. I said that I got into the pyramid project because of TC. And the Mars lander that I'd worked on, I left the Space Research Centre in Leicester in 2003. And then there was a group of people who had come into the Space Research Centre basically to look at the data side of things, because there's a difference between the people who build the landers and then the people who look at the scientists who look at the data. So I got to know of Matt, I think, through Will Westaway. And I looked at what Matt was doing, and he's got some very sensible ideas. Yeah. And so I didn't really know much about Matt's background, and then later I found out. He said, I think he's in Leicester. So, I know Leicester. How do you know Leicester? Worked at the Space Research Centre. What did you do at the Space Research Centre? I said, I was the chief engineer on the suite of tools of instruments on this lander. He said, I was one of the sort of scientists that had come in to analyse the results from that lander. So what are the chances that have come full circle through Egyptology all the way back to the place where it started? That's absolutely fantastic.
That's cool.
And then, of course, he said you should contact, Matt Beall, and here we are.
That's cool. Yeah.
I like stuff like that.
Yeah, me too. It's one of those really cool connections. And of course, he's got that an incredible channel. Ancient Architects is a great channel.
Fabulous.
He's got brilliant content.
I love that. And also, I do like Ancient Architects as well. So, and these are the sort of people that are putting together well thought out things that make you think.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. And yeah, I think they're doing a great job.
Agreed. Well, it was wonderful to chat with you. Again, can't thank you enough for flying over all the way across the big pond to come see me and to have this conversation and to update people on what you're doing. It's important work and super appreciated, I know, by everybody. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. And I've appreciated being invited here and being very nicely hosted. So it's a pleasure to meet you.
Great. Awesome. Well, enjoy your last day here in beautiful Sarasota, Florida.
I intend to.
Yep. And we'll get you off safely back home tomorrow.
Great. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks, Matt.